And hello. And hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Frames. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. Very excited to be with you again this week. Let me introduce my co-hosts. Got Aaron Pags, a.k.a. Fantasy Triage. How you doing, Aaron?
Jorge, it's a beautiful night to say Fantasy Football Live's live.
Nice. Got the podcast co-host, our Fourth and Frames podcast here at Fantasy and Frames. You got Nate Markham. Nate, how are you?
What is up? Looks like that Brady Bunch reunion around here.
Marsha.
Have our Four-Eyed Matchups series article writer. Got Todd Barnes. Todd, how are you?
Not too bad. How we doing, fellas?
Nice. And, of course, we got David from Fantasy Go. Head over to fantasygo.com. You follow him at Fantasy Go NFL. He puts out a lot of awesome content. If you're on TikTok, definitely follow them, Fantasy Go. Although I don't know if TikTok's gotten banned yet or not, but still keep using it.
Still alive, Jorge. Still alive.
Nice. David, do you want to tell the folks a little bit about Fantasy Go?
Yeah, Fantasy Go is a one-on-one consulting platform where you can find the team here at Fantasy and Frames and many more analysts. So check it out and get your draft advice and weekly one-on-one advice from your experts.
Fantastic. Okay, so folks, I know the pandemic, the coronavirus. It is a concern for football going forward. But we here at Fantasy and Frames, we plan on treating everything as if we're going to have football, and we're going to give you the fantasy football content that you deserve, that you want, but more importantly, that you deserve. So definitely stay tuned with us. We're going to be putting out, starting on Monday, we're doing a really big thing here. We're going to be dropping everything you need to know about every division every day for the next 8 days. So what do I mean by that? On Monday, it's going to be our AFC North Day, where every single thing we've done over the course of the summer regarding the AFC North, we're going to be dropping on Twitter. We're going to be reposting. We're going to give you all plenty of opportunities, from learning about the quote-unquote boring players who are sneaking under the radar that you could pick up in your drafts that can help you win a championship, to the players in the division who really stand out per team, to IDP targets, to our podcasts going over the different divisions. You're going to find everything that we here have at Fantasy and Frames that'll get you ready for your drafts. This is draft season after all. And speaking of draft season, we all love our rankings. How's it hard? It's Aaron, you got a fan.
Herschel Stalker. What's up, brother? Q, we call him Q Berry.
What's up, Q Berry?
He said, hey, not you.
Yeah, well, touche. No, but what is it saying? So if you head over to fantasyandframes.com, we have now our rankings, our consensus rankings up on the page. When you read our articles, scroll down, you'll see our rankings there. Everywhere you need to look to find your rankings, to get an idea of who to target in your drafts. You can find all that information at fantasyandframes.com. Okay, this week, as we've been doing with our divisional previews, quote unquote, here on Behind the Frames, we're going to be looking at players in the AFC South, and we're going to be comparing them to players around their ADP, and just giving you an idea of who do we find as a good value and who do we find as somebody who's kind of overpriced. Take this information, apply this to your drafts. But before we start talking about just players around the ADP, let's do a little talk about ADP and the importance of ADP, and also the importance of going and getting your guy. Aaron, you had a good point before in our pre-show meeting. Why don't you talk to the folks about that a little bit?
Thanks, Jorge. I promise to keep this as brief as I can. ADP, average draft position. This is a groupthink experiment that fantasy football has hooked and has been being dragged by for years now. It is what the consensus drafter would do in your situation if they were on the clock, kind of deal. So every player has their own position. Now, this has some value, and we talk about it. We briefly mention it here and there on this show. When we're talking about ADP, we tell you when that position, what that number is on every player that we're talking about tonight and every other Behind the Frames episodes thus far. I want to be clear that ADP has its place, but I think that the place that it's at now is so far too high in your rankings. It's people are taking this and putting it above their own rankings. Now there you have to find a happy medium. You have to trust your gut. You've played fantasy football before. You know how to build winning fantasy football teams, and we've given you some strategy articles. We've given you some basic knowledge that you can put together your own set of rankings, a list. Just jot down some players that you like, and then take a look at their ADP. If they're a first or second or third rounder, then hey, I may not get that guy because those slots are very interchangeable. But when you get later into your drafts, ADP becomes it becomes like a chore. Like it becomes like something that is weighing on you, and all of a sudden now you are dumbfounded and frozen in your pick because, oh my God, this guy with a 6th round ADP is still sitting here in the 8th round. That must mean value. I mean, it may mean value to someone, but it doesn't have to mean value to you. You have to trust your own knowledge of the game and how you want to build your team. And I think we're going to talk about that more specifically about quarterbacks tonight, and then going forward, maybe a little bit more about how you can use your rankings and ADP combined to get the best draft possible. And that's the idea. Best draft possible, not necessarily the best value versus ADP.
No, this is a very good point. I mean, there is a fine line between getting your guy when you feel comfortable and versus getting your guy when the industry tells you where you should get your guy. So that is something definitely to consider. And we'll cover that, I think, on our next podcast a little bit more. So stay tuned to that podcast being Fourth and Frames, which if you're not subscribed to, go subscribe to it right now on Apple or Spotify. Rate, review, let us know what you think. Okay, with all that taken into consideration, let's talk about quarterbacks in the AFC South, and let's talk about where they're going in terms of their draft position. And let's just, Aaron, the topic you just discussed, we're going to hammer this home right now with this first quarterback. He's going in the 5th round, 58th overall. Talking about Deshaun Watson, averaged 22.2 fantasy points per game using FanDuel scoring. Going around players like Devin Singletary, Raheem Mostert, Terry F1 McLaurin, Stephon Diggs. What are your thoughts on Deshaun Watson?
Deshaun Watson is the perfect ADP case for an early diss on what ADP actually represents to you. Deshaun Watson going in the beginning of the 5th round or end of the 4th round in most drafts. He is maybe like he's a consensus top 5 at least. The other quarterbacks going around him aren't that far off from him in ADP. Dak a little ahead, Kyler a little behind, maybe Russ catching up to them both. Let's just talk about Deshaun really quickly before we get to my point. Passing attempts per game. The last 2 seasons under Bill O'Brien with Deshaun, 14th and then 9th. Plays per game, 5th and then 1st in the NFL. But points per game, 28th and 21st. Not a lot of points there. But I'll tell you what the Texans lack in offensive prowess around the goal line, Deshaun makes up for in the rest of the field. He's an elite passer that people don't know about. His completion percentage, 67.8, elite. His rushing attempts in the last 2 seasons, 181 of them for almost 1,000 yards. That is elite at a quarterback level. His offensive line, not great, but 62 sacks 2 years ago, only 44 sacks last year. Of course, DeAndre Hopkins is gone, so now somebody has to fill that wide receiver 1 role. That's the big question mark about the Texans. Deshaun Watson is not the question mark about the Texans here, Jorge.
No, I where he's going, you have a couple of running backs in question. I do like Terry McLaurin. I do like Stephon Diggs, but can I guarantee? Let's talk about them really quickly. You don't know what's going on in Washington with Dwayne Haskins. Is he the answer? I don't know. That kind of causes me to take a hit with McLaurin. Diggs, he's going to one of the most inaccurate quarterbacks in Buffalo. Okay. I'm not sure if I can count on him to produce 22 fantasy points a game like Deshaun Watson has, or at least did last year. So I'm with you right there. But let's say you wanted to wait and you didn't want to take a quarterback there. Let's say you wanted to build up your depth at other positions. Okay, I'm not going to fault you.
I would say why. I know we don't have a lot of time tonight, but I would say why, because top quarterbacks, elite level quarterbacks in fantasy have a very slim chance of busting. And we talked about this briefly before the show. Like these guys, these top 5 guys, this Dak, this Watson, this Mahomes, this Jackson, these guys, they are going to be like for sure top 10 quarterbacks. Like you can write that down right now. These guys are all going to finish inside the top 10 in quarterback scoring. And you cannot say that about these wide receivers and running backs going similarly in the draft in rounds 4 and 5. You are not certain that these guys are going to be top 10, top 15 at their position where you're drafting them at.
Well, this is very true. So kind of, I'm kind of jumping the gun when we get to tight ends, but one of the things we kind of preach here at Fantasy and Frames is, look, you can have your elite players at any position that you can draft whenever you want to draft them within reason, okay? But once they're gone, and you get to the middle of the pack, there's no difference between drafting at the middle of the pack in the middle of your rounds and waiting to the later rounds and getting value later. Mm-hmm. But if you can get an elite player at a position early on, like your quarterback, and you don't have to worry about it, there's nothing wrong with that. But let's say the quarterback you wanted is gone, and so you have no choice now to wait for a quarterback that you're waiting on, that you want to get later on in your draft. Let's get to Ryan Tannehill, for example. He's the next quarterback in the AFC South, according to ADP, 10th round pick, going around guys like TJ Hawkinson, Jonnu Smith, Jamison Crowder, Justin Jefferson. It's a great pick. He averaged, when he was the starter for 10 games, 22.5 fantasy points per game, had a good touchdown to interception ratio, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, had great rushing yard numbers. Nothing is changing in Tennessee. There's no reason to think that this productivity is going to be hampered too much. Of course, you always get regression every year. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but it's looking good in Tennessee. He's a great value pick, but I think you can still get value later on in your drafts. You go to the 12th round, you get Phillip Rivers. I mean, do I have to say anything about Phillip Rivers? He's not a viable candidate. For me, the guy I'm targeting in my drafts, if I miss out on an elite quarterback out of this division, is Gardner Minshew. He's going in the 14th round. He had the most rushing yards out of any rookie quarterback in his 14 games as a starter, 5th overall. He took care of the ball, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Really cool stat. His deep ball completion percentage is 45.1%. That's 4th best in the entire NFL. He was quarterback 19 in fantasy points per game. Most importantly, Jay Gruden's coming to town. Great developmental coach with quarterbacks. They're likely going to have a poor defense, which means a lot of passing, a lot of deep passing. That translates into a lot more fantasy points. If you miss out on your elite quarterbacks and you still see players like Jamison Crowder on the board or Anthony Miller on the board or Justin Jefferson on the board, and you want to grab them and you want to pass on a Tannehill or a Rivers, you can get great value with Gardner Minshew.
Jorge.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever been so far apart on anything in all of our podcasts and live shows ever before than today. Like I am so far off on Tannehill. Last year, the Titans were 31st in pass attempts and 30th in plays per game. And Ryan Tannehill led all quarterbacks in yards per attempt, yards per catch, quarterback rating. He had a 7.7% touchdown rate. These are all Pat Mahomes wishes he had those stats. Right. Sure. Ryan Tannehill is not Pat Mahomes. He's not going to have a Pat Mahomes season. And I'm way off there. I know everyone is all aboard Gardner Minshew. He's a free pick in most of your drafts, but you talked about his deep ball completion percentage. He was 31st in red zone completion percentage when it counted, and only 21st amongst quarterbacks in air yards per game. So yes, he's accurate when he throws the ball downfield. He doesn't do it often enough. And so these are like two guys who I don't want anything to do with. I'd rather have Phillip Rivers. I know he's going to throw for 4,000 yards. He's a great bye week fill-in. He always throws for 4,000 yards. You can mark it down. And 2 years ago, before Andrew Luck just walked off the field, Frank Reich loved throwing the ball with Luck. They've got an amazing offensive line. He's going to have plenty of time to find those wide receivers. I'm surprised. This is like the first time we've ever been really opposite each other.
Yeah, see, I disagree. I think they've built up that offensive line and they invested in the running game. I think that's where they're going. I think they see Phillip Rivers kind of on the decline as far as this elite passer. I think game script favors Gardner Minshew. That's why I'm so high on him, as well as the other reasons. But going back to Tannehill, I think we definitely are on opposite ends of the spectrum on Tannehill. We may have to have like some
Side
kind of
bet.
like bet or
Oh, yeah.
something
Oh, yeah.
going on this season.
Outside the top 15. I'll take it right now.
Okay.
I
Four-eyed
will bet-
fans, keep track of that.
There's no chance he finishes. He was quarterback 3 from week 7. Yeah, week 7 on. 0 chance. Add a 1 to the front of that, and that would be my
No,
my
he's a QB. I think he'll finish as a QB1. He'll be within the top 12 of quarter.
I'm giving you 15. You can have 13 or 14 too.
Nope.
You're on. We're on.
Nope.
Aaron, Nate, we're making a bet about this. Okay.
Here, let's talk about why he won't be
Yeah.
the QB1. And that's because Derrick Henry, who Player Profiler lists as their player comp to Zangief. You know who Zangief is? Street Fighter. That's who they do their player comp to. That shout out to Player Profiler. They're fantastic with that. That was great. That made my entire day reading about that. I have pros and cons with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry right now, ADP is 6th. All the pros are the ones that I believe in, is that he's going to get the bulk of the carries. Every superlative as far as what you want with your first round, floor, he's there. It was even without Tannehill, he wasn't outside too far of the RB1 conversation. But with Tannehill, he, you look from week 7 to 17 on, he was the RB2 behind Christian McCaffrey. Go back to 2018, the last 4 weeks there, you continue that on. There's nobody besides Christian McCaffrey that was better than him. My concern with Derrick Henry, if there's any, I would draft him at 6 right now where he's going, is the loss of Jack Conklin. Jack Conklin, their right tackle, pretty significant loss for one main reason is he was PFF's 9th rated run blocker in all football last year. And Derrick Henry, who was number 1 in yards created a lot of those yards behind the right side. To be honest, that's the only reason I think that the 1,500 yards that he had last year might regress just a little bit, simply because of the offensive line of Conklin specifically. But pretty surefire way. I mean, if you look at, you want just total attempts, he had over 300. Only other, 2 people had 300 plus attempts last year. The receptions actually and targets, that's the knock on him, right? That's what everybody says. They're like, oh, he's not involved in the passing game. And that's true. No one's going to deny that. I'm not going to deny that. But if I want to throw us a statistic that I realize when the numbers are real small, the 30%, the 20% sounds a lot better than what it actually is. But his targets have went up 30% from year over year, from 18 to 19. His receptions went up 20%.
I love this take. This is vintage Nate Markham right here.
That is 6. Now, I'm not trying to fool anybody, but obviously we want to see increase. If you believe Darrington Evans is going to steal anything, I'm not too concerned with him. He was great at Appalachian State, but not really worried. Moving on past Derrick Henry, unless someone has anything negative to say about Derrick Henry. David, you haven't said too much today. Todd?
No, Derrick. I actually am really high on Derrick Henry. I would take him as high as 2 or 3, to be honest. Everyone talked about the catching, and he's not catching passes out of the backfield. I don't give a crap. The guy's getting the ball 30 times a game. He's absolutely feasting. As the fantasy footballers call him, the Tennessee Derrick Henrys. I mean, I personally think Ryan Tannehill got a lot of money to hand the ball to Derrick Henry. He's the kind of guy, if you give him 20-plus touches, he's going to get you 100 yards and probably a touchdown. He had the most rushing attempts last year, second most touchdowns, only behind Christian McCaffrey. So, yes, I absolutely believe in King Henry for sure. I would take him realistically. I'll probably take him at 3 or 4. It's a toss up between him and Kamara, but yeah, he's definitely worth the ADP in my opinion, especially at 6.
Yeah, if Derrick Henry falls to me at 6, 7, I'm jumping all over that all day, every day. Happens in a couple drafts, and I love Derrick Henry. I mean, he gets the ball, like David just said, he gets the ball 20-plus times a game. It's a guarantee. And, when you get the ball that many times, just so happens you fall into the end zone majority of the time.
Exactly. Now, unless Ryan Tannehill starts throwing the ball 40 times, Jorge, never going to happen, my friend.
Never.
He doesn't need those attempts.
He does. Yes, he does. He's not going to average 15 yards per reception. Doesn't matter.
They're going to stick with what works. It's fine.
There's a reason why we're talking about Derrick Henry for 6 minutes, and that's because who the hell wants any piece of the rest of the backfield, sir?
And volume dictates success. And if I'm looking at another player within the AFC South, we go to Jacksonville, who is obviously Leonard Fournette. ADP's at 37 right now. He's running back 17. I got to tell you, Fournette has taken that strange kind of weird ascension and then dissension for me this whole season. Like I really didn't want anything to do with him. And I started digging a little bit deeper. And I realized that the biggest concern I have is that Jacksonville doesn't want him there. And when the team didn't want a player, that gives me reason to be concerned. They've gone past that now. They brought in Chris Thompson. I'm really not too overly concerned with Chris Thompson's overall role in that offense.
Neither is Leonard Fournette. Trust me, he's not worried about Chris Thompson.
And everybody's worried about Thompson stealing all the targets. And they're saying Leonard Fournette, who last year had 100 targets. Fantastic. Obviously, that's not going to stay the same. I do believe that comes down, but let's say it's a 30% drop. Let's say he gets 70 targets and Chris Thompson eats up some of them if he's on the field. That's a huge if. It's Chris Thompson. Leonard Fournette's missed time. He's missed 9 games over the last 3 years. Thompson's missed more. So Chris Thompson, who I do, there's concern for him, getting some of the receptions and third down work. I'm not too overly concerned. I mean, there were only 4 running backs last year with 100 targets, and he was one of them. His 75 receptions with 0 touchdowns, mind you. 0 touchdowns on 75 receptions. How old, Todd, what year were you born?
95.
1995.
95, sweet Lord.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Okay. So you won't know this.
Leonard Fournette was in college.
Exactly. 1986. That was the last year that a person had 75 receptions without a touchdown, and that was like Roger Craig. So the regression in a positive form has to be there. Mind you, this is a guy who was RB9 last year without touchdowns. I'm not sitting here banging the Leonard Fournette drum, but I'm looking at the, an ADP of 37. And if you're at the turn of one and it's coming back and you take that random wide receiver, which I hate. I love loading up. Fournette is a very, very safe 3-4 turn to take as your RB1. I mean, I'm not surprised that here's another little Gardner Minshew little statistic. Gardner Minshew, you shouldn't be surprised that the ball will go to Leonard Fournette. Gardner Minshew had a 36% target share to his running backs in college. He likes dumping the ball to his running backs. It might not be the largest of sample sizes with Washington State in his last year with Eastern Carolina, but that's what he has historically done. He likes giving the ball to his running backs. If that's Chris Thompson, if that's Leonard Fournette, that might be one little thing to dig in and say, okay, maybe the receptions will be there. Again, we don't need the receiving touchdowns or even the receptions to necessarily be there for him to return value, but it helps. And at RB37, I'm 100% there. Any questions on Leonard Fournette? Love, hate?
One thing I would say is
whoa, all right.
Under Jay Gruden, no running. He's never had a running back rush for over 1,100 yards. Last season with Chris Thompson, they had 5 games together, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he averaged seven targets a game. So, I mean, we say that Chris Thompson won't affect Leonard Fournette, but like you said, even a 30% drop-off is pretty significant. And then the fact that Jay Gruden's, he's been in the NFL a long time, never had a rusher go for over 1,100 yards. That's a little bit significant. It's Leonard Fournette, but that is something just to take into consideration.
There is. My biggest concern with Fournette would be game script, and their defense is going to be historically bad. I believe that's what it is. Vegas projects them to be the worst team in the NFL. That's not going to be the worst. They're not going to be the worst team in the NFL if their defense is great. It just doesn't work like that with the running game. So that is my concern, is that the game flow takes him a little bit out of that. But all he has to do is prove that him and Minshew have that connection again, and I think that will supersede anything Jay Gruden can do with Chris Thompson.
And it's built in already, the risk you that you're talking about with Fournette.
Absolutely.
He's already been depressed. His value's been depressed even after a great season that he put up last year. Yep. And so taking him where Nate's talking about 3-4 turn is like, okay, I can see where he's one of these guys in the third round where you're going to be like, really? We all passed on Leonard Fournette again after he was running back 8 in 2019. Then he finished as running back 11 in 2020. Like, what were we doing? Why did we not see this coming? He's part of the offense. Minshew loves throwing to running backs. We saw it for 2 years, a year and a half. Let's get on this.
Yeah.
So, good job, Nate.
Hey, Nate, so if we're talking about running backs that are going in the 4th round, let's talk about one that's going in the 4th round over in Indianapolis.
Ugh. Now,
Marlon Mack's going that high.
I wanted to build into Marlon Mack because I want to see the salivation on Dave grow because I know he loves Marlon Mack, and for good reason. There's no love for
Mack.
But talking about Jonathan Taylor, his comparable again player profile on there is Zeke. I mean, say no more. The guy's a beast. If you saw the picture of Jonathan Taylor recently, he's a linebacker that happens to coincidentally, he's actually smaller in stature than Marlon Mack. He's an inch shorter. He's bigger in bulk. He's probably also put on 15 pounds, I think, in the offseason. He looks bigger than 226. But, I mean, what else do you need? Superlatives aside, he had 320 attempts in 2019, 300-plus in 18, 2,000-plus yards in both. He's going to get the bulk of the carries behind one of the best offensive lines in all of football. The question is going to be when, and that when might be stopped. Not stopped. Be slowed if Marlon Mack actually gets some of the
touches, more touches.
Marlon Mack pulling the plug.
He averaged 4.4 yards per attempt, which is 12th.
Yep.
That was 12th in all of running backs, 200-plus attempts. So he can do that. His targets have gone down 3 straight years. He had hand surgery that cost him, hamstring injuries, shoulder injuries. Marlon Mack is bound to be pushed aside, and Jonathan Taylor will take over.
Get him, David.
I'm not knocking Marlon.
Marlon Mack is still the number 1 running back there, right? And keep in mind as well, we've got 0 preseason, and actual game is so key. You can take all the first team reps you want, but you need to have that game script. Mack was still efficient, and he was great in the red zone. I think until Mack stops producing, it's going to be a split backfield. I just can't see them dropping Mack out of the picture. I think they're going to be a 1A, 1B. I really do. I don't think Mack is going to get 80% of the carries, but I can see them getting a 50-50 split. If Mack drops off, maybe JT takes it. But you're getting Mack probably, 3 rounds later. In my opinion, I'd rather the value of Mack rather than the risk of JT. I'd rather a Leonard Fournette at that turn, and knowing I've got the lead dog there, where Chris Thompson's not a worry, then take Mack, which is probably going to be the lead dog week 1, because you got to worry about those first few wins. At least you've got two number 1 running backs those first few weeks.
You do, and that's why I'm probably going to avoid both for the most part. The only reason, and the way I'm taking Jonathan Taylor, which I've done in some, is if the risk of one of my other running backs, James Conner, et cetera, who might only play the first 6 weeks of the season, then leaves the way for the second half when Taylor, which it came out today that they're going to play the hot hand. And that is either the most terrifying statement you can ever hear or the most gratifying. If you really believe Jonathan Taylor has the capabilities to take over that role, then there's no looking back. I don't. My projections are about an even, 170 to 180 carries a piece split because I think they're going to run the ball quite a bit there.
That's like a 9th round running back.
It is, and that's about
carries.
where Marlon Mack is going. He's going around pick 99, which is probably perfect spot for him. That could be a league winner if he actually holds on to the role enough. And depending upon who gets goal line work, if that's going to be a consideration, we haven't seen what that's going to be. And here's one other little aspect about Jonathan Taylor that scares me is last year, his fumbles were out of the world. He had 7 fumbles. In 41 games, he has 18 fumbles. If you prorate that to an entire NFL season, that turns out to 7 fumbles, which would have led the NFL last year amongst all running backs. If he fumbles the ball early, a hot hand is not going to get him the touches if the hot hand obviously drops the ball. That's the only concern I have about Jonathan Taylor is the fumbleitis, because that's not a situation when you're a pound the ball, run and play defense type scenario. So the only other running back in the AFC South, and everybody, I don't know what to think about it. I find myself, David Johnson is sitting there at pick 53 in every draft that I've ever had. And he's 50. I don't know how his ADP is 53. He's always there at 53. He's always there at 55. He's always there at 60. And I pass on him every single time because of the players around him. And I just don't trust what he did last year in the first 6 games. I know that's what everybody's getting ready to say. But look what in the first 6 games he did. But look how good he was. But he didn't do shit. Sorry from our fans, guys. But
Ken's mother is so appalled at you right now. Okay.
Well, if Ken's mother should talk to David Johnson and tell him to run the ball, because all his stats last year were based off of receptions. He had he was. If you look at the 6 games, I mean, he had 41 targets. And he averaged like 35 yards on the ground. I don't have that in front of me, and I shouldn't say he and make up numbers, but that's about where it was.
Yes, you should.
I should, because if that's where it if that's what if that's what people are gonna come back and say, but look at the first 6 weeks, that carries no weight if he's not receiving the ball. And as we've looked at, we were talking about this earlier. Target share to running backs in Houston last year, 15%. Target share in Houston, 2018, 12%. Target share in Houston, 2017, 13%. You know what that equates to? It equates to a bust and nowhere near a 53rd pick overall.
They've also lost D-Hop there, so you don't have that surefire, wide receiver that was Deshaun Watson's guy. He was looking for Watson all the time. Now they got rid of him for a reason, and they brought in David Johnson to be a 20-plus carry back. So, look, he might fail, don't get me wrong, but I think he's definitely going to get 4 or 5 games of 20-plus touches to prove whether or not he can do it.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly what I was going to say is Bill O'Brien will go to the grave with David Johnson getting the bulk of the poor carries that he's going to have to make sure that I don't know if he really cares, though. That's the thing.
Doesn't.
I don't know if he really does. But I understand. I do agree with you, though. Duke Johnson, come on.
Yeah, I mean, he will get his. He's got to.
You can draft him and Chris Thompson and have them as your running backs.
It was Todd this year who said Duke Johnson, Jorge.
Duke Johnson.
We've done it. We've done it year after year here. And
I'm writing it down. Don't worry.
Yeah,
all right, you mentioned DeAndre Hopkins, David. Let's get into some wide receivers.
All right, so let's start with the Titans here, and everyone's favorite guy they're talking about, AJ Brown. I saw a stat today. I stole it from Twitter. I'll be honest. It was from week 12 to 17. He averaged 19 points per game in half PPR and was the overall wide receiver 1. That's very impressive, right? However, I do worry about AJ Brown. I'll tell you why. Because in 8 games of last year's 16 games, he got 45 yards or less. He's very boom or bust. You look at a lot of his plays, they're deep balls. So you're really relying on deep plays, kind of like a good quality Robbie Anderson, So I'm not saying that he's going to fail, but he is. He's Robbie Anderson, 2.0, 3.0. Like, he's fantastic. Wow. He's a beast. Don't get me wrong.
But Tannehill's going to be so good. He
is. He is, mate. You watch.
Tannehill, no. I'm with you there, Nate. I'm joining Team Nate here.
That's okay. I'll go it alone. I'll go it alone. That's fine.
They could have paid me 20% less, and I could have just gave the ball to Derrick Henry, or end around to AJ Brown, could have saved him some money. But so let's look at one of his games. He went 3 catches off 3 targets for 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. On paper, that's fantastic, right? But that's 3 targets. If he misses those 3 targets, you've got a goose egg. So I'm just a little bit worried. The last stat I want to say with him is there's only 4 games where he got more than 4 receptions. So, yes, he's incredible talent. I do believe in him, but I just don't believe in Ryan Tannehill and his accuracy and that he's going to get the volume there. He had less than 100 targets last year. I know at the end of the year he came in, but I don't know if I believe him. To his credit, the only other competition he has there is Corey Davis, and Corey Davis is the crazy ex-girlfriend, right? You look through a couple of photos and you go, you know what? Maybe I need to give her another chance. We had some good times, didn't we? But then you look through your text messages and go, oh man, she was a psycho. What was I doing? I need to drop her. So that's Corey Davis. I'm not trusting Corey Davis. So that wide receiver core is all AJ Brown, but I'm just very worried about a boom or bust that you're getting probably in the 3rd round.
That's a very good point. Let's shift over to Indianapolis now. What are your thoughts on some of the wide receivers there?
So, I mean, the only guy I really care about is T.Y. Hilton. It's tough because he is getting older. I believe he's 31 now. And last year, he didn't have the best stats, 501 yards, and he did get 5 TDs, which was good in 10 games. He was playing hurt. I believe in Philip Rivers. He loves passing the ball. As you said, Aaron, he's going to go for over 4,000 yards. I think he's going to be looking for T.Y. Hilton. I don't believe in Zach Pascal or whatever his name is. He had a couple of decent games. Jack Doyle is there, so he's going to get some looks, obviously. I believe in Ty. I'm not taking him any earlier than the 5th round, though. That's the absolute earliest I'll take Ty. I think his ADP, what do we got here? He's going the 28th wide receiver and overall 68. So it's probably end of the 5th round. So yeah, middle 5th round is the earliest I would take Ty, assuming he's your wide receiver 2 or 3.
Now, one wide receiver that I know people are going to crucify me with talking about here, Michael Pittman out of USC. I know he's a rookie. I'm feeling good things. I'm thinking good things are going to happen in that passing game. I think T.Y. Hilton, if he's healthy, I agree with everything you just said, David.
I don't believe he's healthy. I don't believe he stays healthy.
I think he's hurt already, to be honest with you. And I'm not joking. I think literally last week they said he had a hamstring injury. So, but then the coaching staff a couple days later comes out and says, this offense is going to, go through T.Y. Hilton. We'll see. If he's healthy, I don't disagree with you there. Now, let's go to Houston. They got rid of DeAndre Hopkins, and they brought in Randall Cobb. What do you make of that?
So, Cobb, I don't care about. He can stay where he's at. Look, here's the thing with Randall Cobb. He got 828 yards last year in Dallas with 3 touchdowns. He's only ever had one season over 1,000 yards. It was an impressive season, don't get me wrong, in 2014. Guys, it's 2014, all right?
Roger Craig was his teammate.
Exactly. Todd was in 3rd grade.
It's his, I think, 9th or 10th year. I believe 2011. So it's his 9th year, I think it is this year. And the touchdowns as well. His last 4 years, he's gotten 4, 4, 2, and 3 touchdowns. I mean, you're not, even if he wasn't getting the yards, but getting the receptions in the end zone, I might believe in him. But no, I'm not believing in Randall Cobb whatsoever.
We don't want you to. We want you to believe in Will Fuller. Tell us why we're drafting Will Fuller. That's what we want to know.
No, we're not. You spoke about the guy, Aaron, and the guy to replace Hopkins is Cook. He has had consistent 1,000-yard seasons 5 years in a row. He's going so underrated. Yes, he had a down year, but guys, isn't that what fantasy football is about? Buying low. And I think this is a great year to buy low. When can you ever get Brandon Cooks in the 6th, 7th round? Probably even later right now. The guy who I believe is going to be the number 1. He's going up against Will Fuller. Yes, he might have to split reps with Fuller for about 6 minutes and 37 seconds until Will Fuller gets injured. But that is absolutely his field to take. Look at what he did in New Orleans. He was absolutely Breeze's guy. Deshaun Watson needs a number 1. He's got Cook. I'm a believer in Cook. He had a down year last year, which is great because I'm buying Cook absolutely everywhere, knowing that it's an off year.
Hold on. Let's break. We got breaking news. Jeremy Nobbs is crazy. He agrees with Jorge that he has Tannehill's top 5. Jeez, how much did you pay him to send that over?
A hefty amount, Nate. But you know what? It's worth it because you know why? It's true. It's true.
Watch the board behind Jorge, the draft picks. He just switched like 2nd and 3rd rounds with him just to get him to give him a little Tannehill superlative.
I have my draft board. I do have Tannehill. I got him in the 17th round. I'm pretty happy about that.
Congratulations, Jeremy. You just won that league.
The one thing I want to say,
they're trash. I'm just going to go back to this. Just y'all are haters. Y'all are just haters.
The last thing I want to say with Will Fuller is last year he had his best year yet, and he got 690 yards and 3 touchdowns. That is the most yards he's received. He's gotten in his career. I mean, I'm just not that crazy about a guy in his 5th year who hasn't exceeded 700 yards.
He's like the 35th wide receiver off the board. So this is my case for Will Fuller. I'm gonna make it really quickly. What other wide receiver 35th, in that 35 to 40 range with like Edelman, Kirk, Slayton, Hardman, Emmanuel Sanders, that type of group. Which one of those guys is going to go off for 50 points on any given week? None of them.
Well,
None of them.
He's gone around. He's gone around the same time as Julian Edelman. Now, albeit I'll take Julian Edelman over him. After him is John Brown, Brandon Cooks, his teammate Marvin Jones, Darius Slayton. I would take all of those guys. Is
this because of the injuries? Because Willful, 11 games he had 700 yards. I mean, put 5 more games on there. He's an 1,100-yard receiver.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, once again, assuming he's healthy and he can repeat the performance, but he's got Brandon Cooks now. Brandon Cooks is not only a deep threat, but he's also a dink and dunk receiver. So
he's faster than Brandon Cooks, and he's not playing with DeAndre Hopkins anymore. And he did all of that with DeAndre Hopkins opposite of him, commanding targets. And so now if he can become the man, like he has wide receiver 1, I mean like top 12 wide receiver type ability if he stays on the field.
So do you think he's going to take the number 1 and Cooks is going to be at number 2?
I just think if Fuller's on the field, he's the only wide receiver that's returning to the room from last year with Watson. So they already have this connection. In those 11 games, he put up almost 700 yards receiving. Some of those games were like mega games, man, like 200 yards receiving, 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. He has elite speed. Just like he has all the skills except for the injury skill. And if you think injuries, being hurt is a skill, he's pretty good at that too. But if he stays on the field, then I only have to pick him in the 8th or 9th round of my drafts. Holy wow, man! I got one of the best wide receivers in the game.
But doesn't that show his boom or bust ability? So if he's had a couple of games of 200 yards, and last year he got 690 yards, you're talking about 300 yards spread over those remaining. Half
the 8th and 9th rounders in your league will be dropped at some point in the season.
Yeah,
35 to 50%. And if Will Fuller stays on the field, you're never dropping him. He's playing every single week for you.
If I've got a guy, so I mean, apples to apples with Cooks, you got a guy who in 5 years consistently has gotten over 1,000 yards, and I think he's gotten between 5 and 9 touchdowns every single year. Excluding last year, he had an off year. If I got a guy who's performed for 5 out of 6 years, and Will Fuller, who's gotten his best performance of 690 yards and playing 10 games, I just want that consistency. I want the guy who's done it before, Mm-hmm. But anyway,
let's quickly shift over to Jacksonville. DJ Chark, that's the only one we're really caring about, right?
1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. His role is going to increase. I'm not interested in D.D. Westbrook. He's really the only one there. I like his ADP. I think it's going to go up. So he's fair for his ADP right now.
Todd, you're nodding your head as we're transitioning to tight ends now. What were your thoughts just there about DJ Chark or the receivers from Jacksonville?
It was more DD. 66 targets, 101 or 66 catches and 101 targets in each of the last 2 seasons. ADP is after 150. You don't get 100 targets that late. I don't know why you wouldn't love him.
Wow.
Todd bringing the fire.
I mean, this has been the most like
we are going at it to each other.
Yeah, like the most two-sided show. Like typically we are in line with each other. The AFC South has got fantasy and frames like torn in half, man.
Who knew this was a hot button? All right, let's go tight ends. Todd, who do you got for us?
I'm gonna skip over Jacksonville today. They signed Tyler Eifert.
God.
I don't want anything to do with Tyler Eifert. Their tight end room last year combined for 496 yards, only 3 touchdowns. So, yeah, completely off on the Jacksonville tight end room.
I had no idea they signed Tyler Eifert. That's news to me. That just flew by.
Yeah, but yeah,
right.
But who knows what if he can get on the field,
undraftable,
consistent. Undraftable. Yeah, it's been basically the same thing for years now with Tyler Eifert.
Yeah.
I'll move into the Texans. They actually led the AFC South and touchdowns for tight ends. They had 9, and Colton Titans had 7 apiece. Other than Darren Foles, I don't really know who you would target in this room. He had 48 targets, 34 catches, 341 yards. And he tacked on 7 touchdowns. So, I mean, I guess the 7 touchdowns kind of just comes along with playing alongside Deshaun Watson. But
undraftable.
Yeah, He didn't pop up inside the Fantasy Pros top 300 for ADP, so that's why I'm quickly passing over those two groups.
Nice.
I'm gonna save the tight end I like the most for last, so I'll go into the Titans with Jonnu Smith.
Ooh.
He had 44 targets last year, 35 receptions, 439 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He has an ADP of 136, and personally, is just a little too high for me.
Even the 11th round. Wow. Okay.
Love
Yeah.
it. Love it.
Piece of.
I mean, personally, I'm just gonna go ahead and switch right over to the Colts right now. And
This is
and Jack
amazing.
Doyle. He has
The
an
heat. I love it.
Yeah, he has an ADP of 155, and personally, I'll just go ahead and I'll take Jack Doyle over Jonnu Smith. I know Jonnu Smith is young and athletic, but I mean, Jack Doyle is two years removed from a 100-target season, and that's not very heard of among tight ends. In 2018, he only played 6 games, but had 33 targets and 26 receptions. Eric Ebron, though, had 110 targets. Last year, their tight end room took a pretty big hit. The top tight end dropped about 50 targets compared to what they had been in the last 2 years. But I just kind of want to touch on what the top tight end has done with Phillip Rivers in the last 5 years. Over the last 5 years, Phillip Rivers' top tight end has averaged 47.4 receptions, 548 yards, and almost 5 touchdowns.
This is the real heat right here, man. This
So,
is the real heat right here.
Just saying, I mean, Jack Doyle is looking like a pretty good target for 500 yards, almost 50 receptions, and close to 5 touchdowns from the tight end spot.
I'm going to put you on the spot, top 12 or not top 12.
Ooh.
He's right now being drafted
I have him, like,
as the 18th tight end. 18th
Yeah,
tight end.
I have him outside. I probably have him more like my 15 range.
So
But,
no Jonnu with Ryan Tannehill, who I think is going to be fantastic this
Oh
year,
my God.
has no love. That's crazy.
This is
Yeah,
a show
no
for
love
the-
for Jonas today.
Show for the age.
Unreal. Okay, folks. Well, we just lost David. That's
David
how
had
much,
to go.
That's how much
He was
you offended David in his
But he
love for
doesn't
Ryan
like
Tannehill.
Dede, and Dede is going after both those tight ends and has over 100 targets in each of the last 2 seasons, just so you know.
David,
Sorry,
you left
guys.
us there. We were like,
Lost you for a second.
yeah,
My
no, all
computer froze.
the Tannehill bashing. I can understand why. You
I know, it was
want
just
to
enough.
let
I had
them
enough.
leave. Yeah, no. Okay, well, that wraps up our episode today. We got one more division to break down for you, which we'll do next week, talking about the players that are on their ADP. I want to thank David from Fantasy Go. I want to thank Todd, Nate, Aaron. Follow all these people. You see their Twitter handles. Fantasy Triage, Nate Markham, Todd1006, Fantasy Go, NFL. I'm Jorge Edwards. We'll catch you next week, folks.
Let's go Blues.